Ruru and Huhu nap in the sun. But in the dark they have fun, chit-chat. Chick naps, Ruru raps, Ruru fans his wing, chit-chat. Kia ora, Tom Kitchen here, and today on The Detail, I'm going back to primary school. There's been plenty of news around new education policy in recent weeks, including these headline grabs.
The ACT Party has sent out a tweet about school lunches. Can you please explain how sushi is woke?
Oh, look, if you don't get that sushi's woke, I don't know how to wake you up.
The nationwide ban on cell phones in schools is now in force, and the Education Minister is warning schools that don't comply to expect a visit from the Education Review Office.
But here's something very basic that really matters when it comes to teaching our children.
The government wants all state schools to teach structured literacy from next year and is spending $67 million to train teachers and to pay for resources.
The Education Minister Erica Stanford says this is well researched and will improve low literacy levels.
The thing is with structured literacy, it works for 90% of kids. We've done a lot of research on this over the last few years. This is not just something we decided and dreamed up in the last little while.
But with that comes pushback.
The Primary Teacher Union is pushing back against the government's plan to make all schools teach only structured literacy for reading.
To think it's the only way is the concern that we have. And we don't think a politician should be dictating to teachers the only way that they should be approaching things.
And as part of this, we may be dismantling a New Zealand legacy.
Reading recovery, the basis of it is based on whole words. So
is that going?
We will be getting rid of reading recovery.
What is structured literacy? How does it differ from what we've taught before? And is it the best way to teach our children how to read? Now, back to that book I was reading. I'm sitting in the office of Auckland University's Rebecca Jesson. She's an associate professor in literacy education. She's taking me through some books commonly used to teach children to read. The first book, which you heard a little bit from at the beginning, is Chit Chat, a story about Ruru the owl and Huhu the bug.
This is how structured literacy works. You're at the bottom level here, Tom, in the kakano level. And the book is designed to teach you to sound out words using your letter sound knowledge. Mm-hmm. So chit chat.
Chit chat.
You've been taught the sounds to make in chit chat.
Okay, so let's open up the first page. Huhu runs into a hut. Bang, clang, a big din, chit chat. Stop the chat, says Weka. Chick needs rest to be his best. That's it. How are you teaching me structured literacy there?
There are no unusual words except for perhaps the. You can't sound out the. And Ruru and Huhu we would tell you because those are their names. All the other words in the book are decodable. You can use your letter sound knowledge to sound them out. The idea is that there are particular sounds in the back of this book, and there's a teacher guide in the back here, and it tells you what sounds we're focusing on.
So it's the ch and the ing?
Exactly right, exactly right. So you're teaching those sounds, and then this book gives you the opportunity to practice those sounds. Mm-hmm. And then after you've read the book, there's lots of opportunity for you to practice mixing and matching the sounds or spelling words using those sounds that you just learned. So it's very structured, right? So I'm going to teach you something, and you're going to practice it, and then you're going to go away and apply it.
So how did structured literacy develop? Here's Michaela Bonner. She's taught Year 0 to 3 pupils for the past 13 years and is trained in structured literacy. She also publishes literacy resources for primary classrooms.
The term itself, structured literacy, was coined by the International Dyslexia Association. So they have trademarked the term. If we're talking more generally, it's an explicit, systematic way of teaching literacy that is seen as building blocks. So you start at the very early stages of teaching letter sounds, then you're looking at spelling patterns, you're looking at the way we can put different word parts together.
Phonics is a very important part of structured literacy, right?
Yes.
How would you define phonics as such?
It's looking at connecting the different sounds of words, the phonemes, to its written representation. So we look at the letter A and we know that the sound of A is A. So connecting what we hear to what we see. That's the phonics side of it.
That's structured literacy, right? But there are other ways we have taught kids to read historically in New Zealand. So
yes.
What are the ways we've taught?
Whole language was a big part from about the 1970s into the 80s with, it came about with Murray Clay, was hugely influential.
And reading recovery, yeah?
Yes, with reading recovery.
I was concerned about the numbers of children who weren't getting help and thought that if we could possibly reduce those literacy problems that were being referred to psychologists by some program or other, it would be an improvement for the education system.
The philosophy behind whole language is that learning to read is the same as learning how we talk and listen. So the idea is that it's a natural process. Therefore, if we just surround children with language and literacy-rich environments, lots of books, we read to them, we put them in front of them, that eventually they will learn how to read.
So we've got structured literacy, right, and then we've got whole language, but kind of between those there was a balanced literacy, right? So what does that mean?
Balanced literacy is what is and has been the most prevalent in schools in the last couple of decades. So I would say not many schools actually teach whole language anymore. It's balanced literacy. So we're in the point now of moving away from balanced literacy into structured literacy. Balanced literacy is very similar to whole language, but with, kind of describe it as whole language but with phonics sprinkled on top. You're looking at quite a small amount of phonics being taught. Often that's only, say, the alphabet letters and a few digraphs. Digraphs being like SH makes a sh, NG makes an ng sound. You'd have your 10 minutes of phonics teaching perhaps in a balanced literacy classroom, and then you would go into texts, reading the kids' readers that had all kinds of spelling patterns that the children hadn't been explicitly taught.
Why don't we try out one of these readers? I'm back with Rebecca Jesson.
This is the Ready to Read series. This is much more focused on language, story, narrative arc, plot development, characterisation. A story about two little kids who are going down the slide.
So is this more the whole language? Would you base it on?
Or balanced, if you prefer. So these ones tell a story and tell a story of friendship in this case.
So let's have a look at this book. Down the slide. Millie, Millie, look at me, said Sunil. Is that how you say his name?
Sunil?
Sunil. I'm going on the slide. I looked at Sunil. Sunil said, come on, Millie, come on the slide. Okay, I said. I went up the ladder. Up, up, up. We sat on the slide. Here we go, said Sunil. Sunil went down the slide. I went down the slide. Down, down, down. Oh no, said Sunil. Look at my pants.
Oh, Sunil shouldn't have gone down the slide on a wet day.
Look at the slide, I said. The slide is wet. And that's the story. It is a bit more engaging and interesting to read.
Yeah, it's a bit more of a story, and there's a sort of a friendship there, and a bit of a gone down the slide and got wet pants, and how does that feel? And maybe we'll go write a story about it. So it's very much around engaging as well as learning through natural English language text. So people who are English language learners or people who haven't had a lot of experience with text get a lot out of using natural language text. People who need practice decoding and saying and using their sounds get a lot out of these decodables.
So if we're using these decodables, the structured literacy method, how do kids sound out the words? Here's Betsy Sewell. She works with older struggling kids, mainly intermediate to high school.
Let's take a really, really simple word. Let's take, let's say, mat. Mat, the cat sitting on the mat, okay? And I'm going to write down that word, and we're going to figure out those sounds. You know, there's the the M, which stands for the sound, and then the A stands for the A sound, and the T stands for the T sound. Some people would go and then A and then T to add them up. I tend to work in those patterns so I can see that A, T. I get that together in my head and I think that's at, and then I can add on the and I can figure out that that's mat.
Okay.
And then I could change that into, let's say, a B and get a bat, or a K and get a cat, or a fl and get a flat, and so on.
So basically, you'll help the child put all those letters and all those sounds together so they can recognise the word when they read it.
Yeah. And then we'll do a few more simple words like that. And then that's what decodable books are books that are made up of those words. So you learn to read the words first and then apply that knowledge to your reading. By the way, do you want to do a really big word?
Oh, go ahead, sure.
Let's do a really big, unfamiliar word. I'm going to do surreptitiously.
Oh, that's a difficult one, surreptitiously.
Yes,
it's
but
not
it's the same process.
Not a word I use commonly.
When I look at surreptitiously, I can see that S, and then I can see that URR, which almost always makes R, like hurry and current. And then I see that EPT, which always makes ept, like kept and slept. And then I see that ischious, which is the same as ambitious or nutritious. And then I see that lee, which is like, I don't know, slowly.
Yeah.
And I just learn to see all those patterns and put them together.
What are some of the most complicated words, if you had to pick out one or two that high school students often get stuck on, what would they be?
Scientific words.
Such as?
Well, words like chlorophyll and all those kind of words that they're going to come across in biology and physics. I know lots of kids who have got a really good scientific mind, or maths mind for that matter, but just reading the language is just too hard for them.
So, yeah, they just have no idea what that word...
I have no idea if I can't figure out... Because they're the most important words in the sentence. You know, if you're reading about chlorophyll, that's the key word in the sentence. And if you can't figure it out and can't work out how that word is pronounced and what it means, I hear lots of maths teachers telling me that the real problem is reading. They can do the maths, they just can't make sense of the question. And that might be they can't figure out the words or they can't understand the language because academic language is different to common speech.
It may not be surprising that our literacy rates are falling.
Primary and secondary schools' students' ability to read and write has been steadily declining for at least 15 years now. This is a known and vexed issue.
And changing to structured literacy may help with that, as it's underpinned by science. Here's Michaela Bonner again.
The science of reading has developed over the last 4 to 5 decades, and it's based on brain science, cognitive psychology, educational psychology, all these different areas of science. The wealth of research that's come out in the last 4 to 5 decades has really shown us the way children truly learn how to read. This research wasn't available back in the 70s and 80s when Murray Clay was developing her approach to teaching reading. But now it's very clear, and that's what structured literacy is, the practice that has come out of the science of reading. Okay. Now we know what's going on neurologically. We know exactly what parts of the brain are being activated when children learn to read, or, as importantly, when learning doesn't happen. With that knowledge, we have been able to design the most effective way of teaching reading, and that is structured literacy.
Isn't it good to have some form of balance, though? Because, I mean, personally, I've read through a few books, and the structured literacy books I've read feel pretty rote, pretty boring, you know, and the more balanced literacy, I mean, it gets you a bit more engaged, gets you a bit more interested in the story.
I used to think that too, and that is something that a lot of teachers say before they start teaching in a structured literacy approach. I have been teaching in a structured literacy classroom in a structured literacy approach with new entrants, and there is not one child that has ever said to me, I don't want to read this, it's boring. The light on their face when they start to read those texts is amazing. To adults, yes, they are a bit boring, but when you sit down and see the pure joy that they get from reading these apparently boring texts is just amazing.
So this debate's also come to light as new reports come out about the experience that neurodivergent children are having in schools.
The Illusion of Inclusion study was conducted by not-for-profit The Education Hub and collected the perspectives of 2,400 people engaged with neurodivergent young people. It says it found a broken system with students and schools in crisis, and says as a country we are failing neurodivergent children on an epic scale.
Structured literacy might help that because it was originally developed for dyslexic children, right?
Structured literacy would be amazing for children with dyslexia, yes. We know that children learn to read in very similar ways. We've had the idea for many years that children all learn in different ways, but that's just not what the research says. We have found that the brain is very similar from child to child to child, and that the way children learn to read is very similar. The slight difference between children with dyslexia and non-dyslexic children is that children with dyslexia just need more. So we talk about having the same approach to teaching, but children with dyslexia just need a higher dose.
Now, a big part of the whole language balanced literacy thing, as we've talked about, is reading recovery, right?
Yes.
Now that's been canned.
Yes.
What do you think about that move?
Pretty excited.
Why is that?
We need the best for our most vulnerable children who are struggling to read. And there is an overwhelming body of research that has said for many decades that reading recovery teaches children how to read like poor readers. We need to do better for them.
So how does structured literacy teach children to be good readers as such, instead of just reading badly?
Because structured literacy teaches children how the English language works. Structured literacy teaches children how words are put together, how sounds are represented with symbols and put together to make words. We're teaching children to look at a whole word and understand the spelling patterns that underpin them, because that's what good readers do.
Rebecca Jesson led the recent Reading Recovery Refresh. So you could imagine her reaction when she heard Reading Recovery was getting canned.
Disappointed that it's going to be cut. We've done a lot of work. We've worked really hard on implementing the structured approaches to literacy that the ministry have asked us to implement. And I worry now about children who aren't making progress in their classroom programs, because the funding has gone away from those teachers' salaries and you can now buy classroom programs. So there isn't yet any announcement on what happens for children who don't learn in those programs.
So what do you mean by a classroom program?
So the structured literacy packages that you would buy from a provider would be professional learning and books that go alongside it and activities and things.
Reading Recovery has helped struggling 6-year-old students get up to speed with reading, with half-an-hour lessons every day for 12 to 20 weeks. It started in New Zealand and spread all over the world, to the US and UK, for instance. But now there's growing international evidence that says it doesn't work. What does Rebecca think about that?
There is one recent study from the US that had 85% attrition rate, and it says that children don't go on to make gains in the US. Even though they're successful in reading recovery, they might not stay successful afterwards. Now, I've studied this in New Zealand, and we've actually had independent evaluations in New Zealand. Our independent evaluation in this country, so from the Ministry of Education by a company called Synergia, could detect an effective reading recovery up to year 10. So while there are international studies that cast doubt on that follow-up, so not on the initial effectiveness, but on the follow-up over time, in this country, because we've got these really strong monitoring systems of checking in on these kids and teaching them again if we need to, then we are able to see that effect all the way up to year 10. So that is, I would say, that is not a valid finding for our country.
Okay, so it might be valid for, say, the USA, but not valid
There were
here.
no New Zealand students or teachers or sites in that study, and that 85% attrition rate, they lost 85% of their students out of that study. So even then I would be quite sceptical. I'd want to see another study. All the other studies that have been done internationally have shown effects up into high school.
If this study hasn't been done here and it's only been done in the States, what do you think, the Minister of Education's reasoning is for getting rid of Ready Recovery?
She needs to spread her budget, I think, more widely, is the short and long of that. She's very concerned. She's hearing a lot of advocacy for structured literacy approaches and hearing a lot of bad news about reading recovery. So I think she has decided to use that money in a different way.
Where is she hearing this bad news about reading recovery from?
There is a very vociferous social media campaign.
Really?
Yes.
Run by who?
There are a number of structured literacy advocates who are very anti the reading recovery work.
We'll finish with a metaphor from Betsy Sewell on why she supports structured literacy.
If you imagine little kids learning to swim, and some of them are dog paddling and some of them are putting their head down in the water and having to stop every so often to get a gulp of air, and some of them are learning to breathe properly and swim overarm. They're all swimming. They can all do it. If all need to do is get down the length of a shallow swimming pool. But only one of those systems will work if you're in the ocean and caught up in a rip. And it's much the same with reading. All sorts of ways of approaching words will work if you're only reading, 7-year-old material or 8-year-old material. But then sooner or later, you do have to go to intermediate school. You do have to go to secondary school. You do have to go out into the workforce. And the demands there require much more sophisticated skills. You do have to learn to read properly if you're going to succeed in those areas.
You have to be able to swim in the ocean rather than just swim in the pool.
You actually have to be able to swim in the ocean, and a rough ocean at that, if you're caught in a difficult situation. Yeah. This is a pattern that's worldwide. It's slow to change in America, it's slow to change in Australia, and suddenly, in the last few years, this move to structured literacy is a worldwide phenomenon. It's not just happening in New Zealand. It's taken a long time. The research has been going on for, 40 years. I've been saying that for a while too. It must be 50 years now. It's been going on for a long time, and it's just taken time to filter down into the schools.
That's it for today. The Detail is funded through RNZ and NZ On Air. Alexia Russell produced this podcast. Jeremy Ansell engineered it. Thanks to Rebecca Jesson, Michaela Bonner and Betsy Sewell. I'm Tom Kitchen. Mā te wā.